Oh, Israel. We turn from God in so many ways, and we look at Israel and think, gosh, why didn't they know? Well, we're the new Israel, and we still don't know. So we read from Jeremiah this morning. Jeremiah, they call the whining prophet, because he was always whining at the people. And this morning he whines to us, and I pray that you will take heed of what Jeremiah has to say. Hear the word of the Lord, O house of Jacob, all you clans of the house of Israel. This is what the Lord says. What fault did your fathers find in me, that they strayed so far from me? They followed worthless idols and became worthless themselves. They did not ask, where is the Lord who brought us up out of Egypt and led us through the barren wilderness, through the land of deserts and rifts, a land of drought and darkness, a land where no one travels and no one lives. I brought you into a fertile land to eat its fruit and its rich produce. But you came and defiled my land and made my inheritance detestable. The priests did not ask, where is the Lord? Those who deal with the law did not know me. The leaders rebelled against me, and the prophets prophesied by Baal, following worthless idols. Therefore I bring charges against you again, declares the Lord, and I will bring charges against your children's children. Cross over to the coast of Kittim and look. Send to Kedar and observe closely. See if there has ever been anything like this before. Has a nation ever changed its gods? Yet they are not gods at all. But my people have exchanged their glory for worthless idols. Be appalled at this, O heavens, and shudder with great horror, declares the Lord. My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. This is the word of God for the people of God. It's a hard word from God. But yet, oh so relevant. Jeremiah is calling the people of God on the carpet. He's saying, okay, people, it's time to look at ourselves, for they're forsaking and forgetting the God who had rescued them from slavery, the God who had brought them out of Egypt. And Jeremiah especially is speaking to the priests and to the elders. God has placed these people in leadership, and God says, you, my people, have been installed as leaders, and you have led blindly, and my people have gone astray. That's our fault. It's the bigwigs. It's the ones who were put in leadership by God who have screwed up. For Jeremiah, and all throughout his book, no one is listening to God. Nobody. Not the elders, not the lawmakers, not the priests, not the people, nobody, nor are they even trying to discern the will of God. No wonder Jeremiah is whining. People, he sees it's coming. He knows what we're doing to ourselves. And so God in turn says to the people, declaring, what have I done to deserve you from turning from me? The God who brought us to the land of milk and honey, the God who brought us creation, the God who brings us all the resources we need. Why have you turned your back against me? And what wrong can your ancestors find in the God of gods? Jeremiah highlights two things that we've done to go astray from God, that we have failed to do. We've forsaken God. We've forsaken the fountain of the living water. We are filling our cisterns with other things instead of the living water of God. In other words, we put into our own cisterns what we think should be there, the worldly stuff. And guess what happens to our cisterns when we do that? And this is our bodies, this is our minds, this is our souls. They begin to crack, and they begin to leak, and they're no good. They no longer can hold the living water of God that sustains us. This is what's happening to Jeremiah and the Israelites. And guess what? This is still happening today. For Jeremiah, the people have long turned from this living water. And they begin to fill their cisterns with the liquid gold of the world. They begin to have pagan alliances with other gods that aren't even really gods. They begin to accumulate this worldly power within themselves. They fight bloody wars. We have false prophets in the pulpit. We have unrepentant kings in leadership. You might say it's like those that are lost at sea. What's the one thing you shouldn't do when you're lost at sea? Don't drink the water, because you're just going to get more thirsty. And that's what's happened to the people of Israel. They're drinking the water of the world, of the sea, and it's not quenching them. They're even thirstier, and their insides are drying out, and it's cracking, and it's breaking, so now everything that they put in pours out. There's nothing to sustain them. Jeremiah goes so far to say that as people, when we chase after the world's worthless idols, our cisterns become worthless themselves. Jeremiah calls this the worldliness that we chase after wastefulness, foolish wastefulness, actually. I brought you into a plentiful land to eat its fruits and good thing. But God says, you have entered it and defiled it and made God's heritage an abomination. Ouch. We throw that word around sometimes. I hear people use that word abomination to describe a few things in our world. I have yet to see someone look in the mirror and say, because of what I do and because how I treat God's creation, I too am an abomination. That's harsh. But that's what Jeremiah is saying to us. Jeremiah is saying to us that we have a responsibility in this world to take care of creation. To take care of the cisterns and what we put into the cisterns so that we may be a blessing to the world, to creation. And God says when we defile that, for our own good, for our own greed, for profits, we are an abomination. Ouch. Because we all do it. We are just like the Israelites. We can sit there and we can read about the Israelites and say, man, they didn't get it, did they? Well, guess what? We don't get it either. This is sin. This foolish wastefulness of our resources is sin. And it causes us to live outside of God's intentions for us. In fact, it's the exact opposite of what God created us to be. We are dirt, picked up into the hand of God, breathed on, and created. We are created out of this beautiful creation of the world and everything in it. And God says to God's people, you are the crown and glory of my creation, and I have created you to take care of it, to be good stewards of it. How are we doing with that? We have a special relationship with God, you and me. One of love and interdependence, and one with the rest of the created order. We are made in God's image, you and me. created to do the things on earth that God can't do because Jesus isn't here anymore. And today Jeremiah calls us to remember our responsibilities for this planet, to care for the animals, the land, the dirt, the sky, the sea, and we are to delight in the trust that God has put us in to care for it. Lack of care from us and foolish wastefulness in our behaviors and actions are an abomination to God. Let me read this. It's a choice. We have a choice to care for creation because God gives us free will. We can choose. This is a book I'm reading called A Monk in the World, and it's by Wayne Teasdale. A profoundly important part of the spiritual life is to use our time, our work, or career, and our resources wisely. Often that is a long journey in itself. Gaining this wisdom is our own choice, our decision to be in the world but not possessed by it or obsessed over it. To be in the world but not of it. This is the perspective that allows us to value time, career, and resources with a genuine understanding. Church, we have participated in defiling the land. We have not been the co-care for creation. We at times are responsible for stripping its resources, for dirtying its oceans, for contaminating its water. And if we haven't done it personally, then we are responsible in our complacency to it. The rainforest is on fire for development purposes, for greed, for profit, for money. Our oceans are trashed beyond what we could even imagine. For what? So we don't have to pay to dispose of them, for greed, for money, for profit. I was in Africa many years ago, and I remember coming into Zimbabwe and getting off the plane, and I stepped on the ground, and I had this feeling of pain that went through my whole body. And I wasn't sure what it was, and so I spoke to one of the other pastors who was with me. I said, do you feel this? I feel the land screaming for help. It was odd. It was weird. I didn't understand it. Africa is being destroyed by the stripping of the copper out of its land. The Chinese are over there just stripping it. And the people are getting nothing for it. There's abject poverty over there. It is being destroyed, the land. It is being tilled up, not for the goodness of God, not for growth, not for taking care of people, but strictly for greed. We have nuclear explosions because everybody wants to be the biggest and the baddest. And they affect our planet. They affect the universe. We have melting ice caps as a result of our own destruction. We have trophy killing of animals just so we can hang it on the wall. It took a middle-aged, autistic woman to teach us how to humanely slaughter animals. There are certain ocean liners that while we're on a cruise heading out to sea are dumping all their trash in the ocean. I'm not using those ocean liners anymore. I'm not going on cruises anymore to do that. I try to do my research on corporations and organizations, and if I'm going to support them with God's money, I better know what they're doing. Because if they're destroying our world, I'm not going to support it. Just because the trash isn't rolling up in your backyard or in my backyard, or just because the water isn't tainted with lead yet in our community, don't become complacent, church, because it will happen. It's just a matter of time unless the church becomes the care of creation. Unless we do something about it. We are the jewel and the crown, you and me. If we don't stick up for the land and say, yes, we need meat, we need chicken, we need milk, we need greens, we need all of that, but let's do it responsibly, then we are as much to blame as those who violate God's creation. Verse 12 tells us that being appalled, that being shocked, that being desolate are appropriate emotions for believers who see foolish wastefulness with such of the extravagant blessing that God has given us. We should be appalled by it. We should be shocked by it. We are complacent with it. Have you thought of creation as this extravagant blessing given to us by God? And that we are stewards of it, to keep it beautiful, to keep it clean, to keep the dirt from not being, the dirt that we grow our food in is contaminated, for the most part. Take a sample, take it to the University of Gainesville and see what you get. The animals eat the contaminated grass. We eat the contaminated animals. It's this cycle over and over and over. Church, we've got to do something about it. We are killing ourselves. This is an area that, when species go extinct, if God wants them to go extinct for a reason, then hey, go God. But when we just want to put a head on the wall and these animals are going extinct, woe to us. And woe to the church for not saying, hey, let's remember why we're here. Now, I'm not saying don't hunt. And I'm not saying don't fish. And I'm not a tree hugger. But I'm saying let's work together to do it responsibly, where we're not wiping out the resources of creation that God has given us to protect. Do you have something that you consider in your life an extravagant blessing? What would it be? What is your extravagant blessing?
My cool car.
Your cool car, yeah. Hello. What
My
else?
family.
Family.
Oh.
Your wife. Oh. Yeah. Food. Food is an extravagant blessing, yes. And so what would happen if someone came in and tried to destroy that blessing? Would you stand by? We have our jobs, don't we? We go to work. Some of us are retired. But we've got a bigger job than our work. We have a divine appointment to be caretakers of this entire planet and everything on it. If you don't believe me, read Genesis. And we're missing the extravagant blessing that comes out of having a healthy planet and a healthy people because of it. So how do we begin, church, to change our thought process around this? How do we begin? Jeremiah gives us a beautiful example of how to begin. And Heather, this wasn't even planned, but Heather totally lived this out today. Jeremiah says, we have stopped telling the story of God's deliverance in our lives. The Israelites have forgot for generations to tell the story of how God brought them out of slavery and chains upon them and freed them into this land of milk and honey to live with this abundant blessing. That story has been forgotten. And so the first thing that we have to do, and Heather did this morning, was said, this is how God unchained me. This is the deliverance of God. And when we begin to tell that story, our life and our cisterns begin to live like we are the children of God. And the world becomes more important to us. And the dirt and the contaminated dirt becomes a problem for us. And the plastics in our water become a problem for us. Now, before they roll up on our back door, and then there's nothing we can do about it. If we lose the resources that maintain our lives, church, we have no life to maintain, and it's no one else's fault but our own. But we must tell the story of God first. That's where the power lies. That's where the ability to look like Christ lies. When we stop telling the story of God, we stop looking like Christians. Living with God is an active relationship. And when we live and we tell the story of God, we begin keeping the promises that we've never kept. We begin taking care of each other and welcoming strangers. We even forgive debts because Christ is the cistern from which the water that we live and drink dwell. Our cisterns are no longer broken with all these idols of this world that just fly out of us. We live for one thing, to share God's story with all of creation. And when we do that, we learn that creation is both sustainable and sustaining. And that it can be cared for, and that we can provide a way to dispose healthily of our trash. Do you know that we send big containers of trash all around the world so the world can dispose of our trash here? That's sad. And I would even go to say that's a bit sickening. We must do better. Jeremiah is calling us to do better. God is saying, I have created you to take care of this. So do it. God demands us to do better, to care for this extravagant blessing called earth, called creation. I don't know where to start. I just know God wants us to do something. I still carry plastic out of Publix. Bad, 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 bad. Because I forget to take the bags in with me. Bad, bad, bad. I got to do better. We got to do better. We have to make sure that who we support with God's money, who we support with God's time is good for creation. And if they're not, don't support them. Choose one thing in your life that you can do different. One step. One thing. Is it getting hot in here? Good. It should. This sermon should make us uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me to preach. Because when we don't care for creation, what we are made for, we are called an abomination. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be an abomination. One thing. Jeremiah says, tell the story of God's deliverance. And through telling that story, your cistern will begin to change. Your cistern began to change. You got nervous? Mm-hmm. And a tear? You kept telling God's story. You may be the beginning of us saving creation with that story. Share God's deliverance in your life. It's the beginning. I don't know how God will work in each one of you. I don't know where God will move you to make a difference in this world. But share your story of deliverance. How has God saved you? And then you will be a savior of creation. Not a godly savior, but God's chosen jewel. and the saving of creation. So we come to the altar this morning